Welcome back to Community Conversations. We're recording this session virtually on Zoom, and I'm glad to have back for a second time here, Sonya Bellafant, who is the Executive Director at 603 Legal Aid. Thank you for coming back and joining us, Sonya, because it's a really important time, an important topic that I'm sure you can elaborate more on, but I think really this kind of was sparked by a ruling by the Supreme Court in regards to the eviction moratorium. So maybe just start off by filling us in for those people who maybe this isn't pertinent to them or they've been out of the loop in current events. Sort of, this was back in, I think, August 27th or August 28th, that Supreme Court ruling.
Yes, well, first, thank you for having me back, Josh. I really appreciate it. I couldn't agree with you more. This is really a huge issue and probably one that has some significant impact on communities, particularly the low-income communities that we serve. But you reference a Supreme Court decision, and I don't know if many people are keeping track, but you're right. The Supreme Court determined that the eviction moratorium needed to come to an end. And what that means is that the hold that was previously placed across the country on eviction proceedings is now lifted, and landlords can now move forward with evicting their tenants for many reasons. In a lot of instances, of course, due to the pandemic, there are many people who have been simply unable to find work or for health reasons could not actually get out into the workforce for fear of exposing themselves to COVID-19. So what we are seeing now is, as a result of the Supreme Court decision, which was to some degree, I must admit, anticipated at the last decision, but and I'm referencing the decision that was done in June. But what we're seeing now is the beginning of what some people have called a tsunami of evictions that are rolling out, not only in New Hampshire, but across the country.
So you mentioned kind of evictions. Now people could be tossed out of their apartment for their rental for any reason. Now, for specifically this program, we talk a lot about New Hampshire residents, Concord residents. How does this specifically impact, if I were to get an eviction notice being a New Hampshire resident, what would I have to do? I know that might be two different questions there, but
Right.
for a New Hampshire resident, what do you have to do at that point?
Well, I want to caution anyone who's receiving notice on eviction or any other court matter that you should always look into what your defenses are, what your resources are, and of course, you should appear in court. In the absence of doing so, a default judgment can be entered against you, and if you have any defenses and you haven't actually, sought to bring them before the court, then that can be problematic. So I think you and I've talked on this, although I'm licensed in other states, I'm not quite licensed just yet in New Hampshire, but I did do some research in preparation for what we're seeing now with the evictions rolling out. And I know that in New Hampshire, there's a special process for evictions. And a landlord can lawfully evict a tenant without, or cannot lawfully evict a tenant without following some specific steps that are governed by the New Hampshire state law. And I'm just going to say it's RSA 540, just to give people a general idea. I don't want to get too far into the weeds. But really what that means is a tenant can be evicted for violating the lease. Non-payment of rent, for instance, could be considered a violation, and in almost all cases generally is. If the tenant doesn't have a written lease, then he or she can be evicted for a number of reasons. And it's still, the landlord would have to follow a lawful process to evict a tenant. For instance, a lot of times people will call 603 Legal Aid and they'll say, oh, I received a notice from the landlord that they're going to evict me, but it's not actually a court documentation which has a date that they have to appear. And so they are not aware of that process. And when they call 603 Legal Aid, we can give them an idea of what the process is and the steps the landlord must actually follow before they can actually be physically removed or evicted from the rental property.
So just to back up for a second, for those who didn't tune into our previous episode, just give us a quick snapshot about 603 Legal Aid, your organization. Just give us the quick, for people who just might not realize this is a resource out there for them.
Certainly, I'll be happy to. So 603 Legal Aid is the statewide centralized intake here in New Hampshire. So if you have a civil legal issue and it can have to do with housing, it may be public benefits like supplemental nutritional assistance program, or you have an unemployment case or matter that you want some consultation on, or a senior, 6 years of age or older, and you have a legal issue that you want to discuss that's civil, not criminal, because that's where the New Hampshire Public Defender's Office comes in. But civil matters that impact people's basic necessities, that's where 603 legal aid comes in. So they call our centralized intake number, we take some information, and then we will refer them to the proper resource. It may be a pro bono attorney, it may be a staff attorney here in-house at 603 Legal Aid, or it may indeed be referral to New Hampshire Legal Assistance. As an alternative, they have a full service firm, a more traditional firm, and they also take cases directly from 603 Legal Aid. But in order to access those organizations, or specifically New Hampshire Legal Assistance, everything comes through 603 Legal Aid here.
Because I consider that there's a lot of hidden gems in New Hampshire, in Concord. You guys definitely fit in that sort of hidden gem, in the sense of, I'm sure a lot of people go, once they realize they've worked with you guys, that you probably get the reaction of, oh my God, I had no idea this existed. Or you probably get that a lot, right?
We do, and that's one of the reasons why 603 Legal Aid is has merged to eliminate some of the confusion in the community. And let me add, the way to access 603 Legal Aid, there are two. So someone can contact 1-800-639-5290 between 9 and 1 in the afternoon, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Monday through Friday. But in the alternative, we're available online 24/7 to accept applications. And that often will help for people who are under a time constraint, or they can't get away for their phone or something of that nature. But you're right. Unfortunately, even in this day and age, with technology being what it is, we are working really hard to amplify awareness concerning 603 legal aid and accessing civil legal aid here in New Hampshire.
Okay, great. So kind of the next thing that I thought we might want to get into, that we probably can't get into too in depth, but it's worth bringing up when it comes to eviction specifically, is that there is federal funding that, as far as I understand, was made available to the states for them to be able to come up with their own funding systems for tenants and for landlords. Maybe just give us an idea of how that is supposed to work for New Hampshire residents, and what tenants could do to pursue that.
Josh, you don't ask me any easy questions, do you?
No, I get right to the tough stuff. Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that. I think that the one that most people should be looking for and maybe are most familiar with is the New Hampshire Emergency Rental Assistance Program. It's currently accepting applications. It actually assists with both back and future rent and utility payments from landlords and tenants. The program provides payments directly to the landlords and the utility companies to help the tenants stay in their homes. The beautiful thing about this program is that everyone's getting the word out. For instance, in the courthouses currently, there is let me make sure I understand, the Community Action Program, the CAPS is what the acronym is here in New Hampshire. They're really helping us facilitate getting the word out and pairing tenants and landlords with this resource so that we can help people stay in their homes and minimize the impact of or the exposure of COVID-19. But there's also I hate to do this. I often feel like that being new to New Hampshire, there are so many acronyms and entities that I'm aware of, but if I'm not mistaken, I think it's called the Southern New Hampshire Services is also one of the companies or community services that's really helping get the word out and pair tenants and landlords with this program. Now, I still think, and I have my attorney hat on, to be honest, I still think it's important for tenants to be aware of what their rights are and to know what the process is. And so I would encourage anyone who's facing eviction to still pursue that information. It's better to have the education and be armed with how to advocate in your own best interest, as well as being able to access resources such as the New Hampshire Emergency Rental Assistance Program. But there's also funding and assistance for homeowners as well that's coming down the pike to give homeowners who are in a very tough situation as a result of COVID-19 as well. And so the best way to keep it all straight, because even me as a new person, new resident of New Hampshire, it's kind of difficult with everything coming out so quickly and sometimes confusing. Call 603 Legal Aid. Our intake staff has their pulse on the various resources available for veterans, the resources available for low income and marginalized communities. All of that information, our intake staff, they're boots on the ground and they're fully prepared to make sure that we can impart that information to everyone who reaches out to us.
It definitely came across as overwhelming, whether it comes to the civil court process, that can seem intimidating, or filling out applications or paperwork. I imagine a lot of ordinary people might get intimidated. You know, you see this really crowded web page with different links and you're not sure where to go.
Mhm.
Just to the common person, that does seem intimidating to go through these processes.
I think it can be. For instance, another good example, I know the Concord courts are working on a mediation pilot project. And a lot of times people don't even know what mediation is. And so when you see that on their website, it may be a little bit more intimidating. And it may just add to the confusion. The wonderful thing is their project is really designed to help landlords and tenants in the Concord Circuit Court involved in eviction cases. They're helping them free and confidentially try to resolve and voluntarily settle on how to bring the case to a resolution before they get to the court hearing, for instance.
That's a great example. And again, just being sort of the common person, something I'm a little taken aback by, just sort of those processes. But communications and understanding where the resources are, that's half the battle. So yeah, that seems
I couldn't have said that any better. Oftentimes landlords really are just trying to be made whole. I mean, when people get behind in rent, it can put landlords in a very tough position, understandably so. But with things like the emergency rental assistance program, the landlord and tenant can come to the table and they can resolve the issue, and both parties can actually walk away ahead, if you will, because the landlord will then be made whole, and then the tenant will still have the protection of the housing, which is very difficult to get here in New Hampshire, to be honest. Affordable housing is at an all-time I want to say minimum, because I'm new here. It's my understanding it's always been tough to get rental housing here.
it's been
But
very bad. It's a bad rental market. I would say it's a housing crisis. I mean, people say housing crisis with people purchasing property, but I believe that's technically the case with rentals as well.
I'd agree. I mean, nationally, the typical rule of thumb is if you're renting, your rent should comprise about 30% of your income. But here in New Hampshire, in reality, it's more like 40%. And that's really tough for a family struggling with, for instance, a minimum wage employment. That can be really tough. And that's why it's so important to preserve the stability of the housing, which, as you know, I'm sure it impacts so many other facets or components of a family, from the stability in the children's education to accessing good grocery stores or medical care, to being close to employment. There are a host of reasons why preserving the stability of housing can really help preserve the income and stability of the household collectively, and the children in the household and their educational basis and where they can be in the future.
Right. And in the big picture, the ripple effect of when the family is supported, then it helps in our education system and in all other facets of what makes a good community. So it does have the ripple effect everywhere.
I couldn't agree more. I would be remiss if I didn't share that I know that to learn more, not only can you contact 603 Legal Aid, but the New Hampshire Emergency Rental Assistance Program is also being facilitated and shared by, I think it's capnh.org, I think is their website. And so everyone's trying to get the word out. The resources are out there. We just got to make sure we get the word to those who really can benefit from it.
Yeah. So sounds like to me a big key that you've mentioned a couple times is tenants understanding their rights. Understand
Yes.
rights. That's, could you just maybe just, I think you did explain, but just sort of reiterate sort of that point a little bit more for our audience.
So, okay, so let's talk about what we say. Attorneys will typically say good cause for an eviction. What's a good cause? And so someone may contact 603 legal aid and they're saying, I'm being evicted and I don't know why. Well, in the state of New Hampshire, there are 5 good causes for eviction. The one we're hearing the most about currently, of course, is failure to pay their rent. It's a breach or a violation of the contract, which is the lease. But there's also substantial damage to the property or some sort of behavior or conduct that's impacting the health and safety of other people who live there. There is a violation of another provision in the lease. There can be other good cause. But understanding whether or not there is validity to the good cause or valid basis for why they're saying they're being evicted is really important. And it helps when you have an attorney who can actually give you a perspective on what's being claimed or listed in that eviction notice. Yeah, I will add one other thing. It never ceases to amaze me that people don't realize there's no right to counsel for a civil case. So often people will go to court and think, well, they're going to give me an attorney, and that's not the case. And that's why it's so important to really be proactive and prepare before you go into the courthouse. The other thing I will share is that 603 Legal Aid does a lot, not only from the perspective of giving people advice, but sometimes it's a matter of drafting a motion or a response to the court that the tenant can actually give when they arrive in court. And it really helps a lot. For instance, if you are applying for the emergency rental assistance program and you may need some additional time, perhaps the court will entertain a motion for a continuance. And that's something that most people may not know how to draft, but here at 603 Legal Aid and with New Hampshire Legal Assistance, our sister organization, we often can assist people in doing that. And you have the right as a tenant to say, look, I understand there's rent owed. I'm really working aggressively to make the landlord whole or get myself caught up. Okay. I mean, no one really expected the pandemic. Let's be perfectly frank.
Of course not. Yeah. So it sounds like there's a couple. So like mediation is one way that you could come to some kind of settlement between the two parties, or it could, what do you call it, a continuation, or just it
A
buys.
motion for continuance, yes.
So it buys
Yes.
a little more time where if they're trying to line up a job, they're trying to get some funds together to be able to pay it. It gives them a little more time to.
Right. I'm not sure if lining up a job would be a good basis for continuance because even if you have a job, it takes some time, of course, to gather the income to bring rent current typically in a general circumstance. However, if you are informing the court that, I'm aware of the emergency rental assistance program or I wasn't aware of it, but I have applied today, I just need an opportunity. I think that we're going to find that there are going to be people who are receptive. Again, a lot of landlords just want to be made whole. They want that back rent so that they're not, financially struggling as well.
Right. So that's, I mean, a ton of information. It's good to know where the resources are and for people to understand their rights as tenants and understand the process. Maybe just remind us one more time where they can find some of these resources, or if you had any other final thoughts before we wrap things up here.
I did. I wanted to share 2 things. One, I'd be happy to share those resources I referenced a moment ago one more time. But I do think it's important, and this is a good venue for me to remind people of a couple of things. So most people who are renting have probably put down a security deposit. And a lot of people aren't aware there are some things that can and cannot be deducted from a security deposit. So a landlord may deduct from a security deposit for rent that's owed or for repairs, the cost of making a repair to the rental property once it's determined that that repair is beyond or more than normal wear and tear, for instance. And then, of course, if there is, sometimes there's an issue of a real estate tax. And I know that there are some situations where that may come into play. But just to give people an idea, those are what are probably more along the lines of permissible or permitted deductions from a security deposit. But back to your point about accessing the resources, specifically like emergency rental assistance program or where to find information on the mediation pilot project. For the emergency rental assistance program, they're free to call 603 Legal Aid, again, at the number I referenced earlier. The other option is to do an online application at 603legalaid.org. And the alternative, CAP New Hampshire .org, it's also assisting people with starting applications and accessing that resource. CAP, as my understanding, is also available on site at some of the courthouses, as is, again, Southern New Hampshire Services. And I think I've captured them all, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, this is so helpful, Sonya. And I know there's a lot of renters out there in Concord and New Hampshire who this is really great information. It's information that they can access. Is this pretty much 24/7? I mean, website's 24/7, the phone number 24/7 as well.
Our phone number is only from 9 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. However, our online application is 24/7, and we do process those within 24 hours to 48 hours. I'm sure capnewhampshire.org is 24 hours as well. But I would encourage people, begin reaching out. The earlier you apply for the resources, the more likely you are to maintain your current housing. And that's really the goal, especially as we go into the fourth quarter of 2021, and we're going to see some inclement weather. And we really don't want to see any more dire circumstances or any more increase, if we can mitigate it, the increase in COVID-19 exposure.
Right. So people shouldn't put this off anymore. Get this taken care of. Go through the process. Don't say, I'll wait till tomorrow, I'll wait till Monday. Just go through the steps as soon as you possibly can, right?
You know, Josh, if I had $1 for every time I met with a client or talked to someone on the phone and they said that they, it was really overwhelming, they really put it off. And I had to say to them, sometimes time can work against you. The earlier you start applying to access resources, the more likely you are to be successful and to avoid the eviction and the ultimate moving, relocating, and uplifting the family and uprooting them from the education, the communities they're currently in. So I can't stress it enough. Yes, time is of the essence. If you are facing eviction or you fear that you are in risk of eviction because you have been unable to maintain your rent or your utilities, now is the time to begin looking at available resources before, if you can, before you begin to receive a notice or an eviction to appear, a notice to appear in court.
Very well said, and I think we'll leave it at that. That's a great way, I think, to get people, to encourage them to not wait any longer and to pursue those remedies. So thank you to Sonya Bellafant from 603 Legal Aid. This was great. I'm glad that you were able to teach me a lot. I feel like every time we've done this, you've taught me a lot. So hopefully we can do this again soon, and hopefully under better circumstances for everyone in our state. But keep up the great work that you guys are doing, and we'll talk to you again soon. And I'd like to thank our audience, whether you're watching on YouTube or Concord TV channel 22 or listening to the podcast and so on. Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like your nonprofit to be featured on Community Conversations, please reach out to me. We'd love to host more of these programs with more organizations. So until next time, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.